Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. My name is Katie Walsh. I'm one of Penn Foster's early childhood education instructors, and I'm excited to be welcoming you back. I see some familiar names already from our sessions earlier this morning. We're so glad to have you all here with us as part of our Student Success and Career Fair webinar series for 2018. In just a moment, we're going to be visiting with Melanie Andreoli-Carpenetti. She's going to be sharing with us some really valuable, effective interviewing skills. I took a quick peek at her PowerPoint, and I can tell you that she has really great information to share with us. But before we get started, I just want to do a quick screen check and audio check just to make sure that everything is working appropriately. So on your screen right now, you should see a sample image of the GoToWebinar control panel. You're finding your actual control panel probably on the upper right side of your screen. You have the ability to open and close that control panel by clicking on the orange arrow at the top. And then embedded in the control panel itself is a questions box. So if you could please access the questions box, simply let us know that you can see the screen and hear my voice, and also share with us, please, a little bit of background information about who you are, about where you're coming from, and share with us any questions that you may have for Melanie today. As you're doing so, I'm also going to quickly launch a poll just to get a good sense of whether we have Penn Foster current students, Penn Foster graduates, if we have guests of Penn Foster that are visiting with us for this afternoon's conversation, also Penn Foster partners and Penn Foster employees as well. So let's get this set up, and I'm going to leave this poll here for maybe about 30 seconds or so. So you're finding that on your screen. Just simply select one of those 5 categories: Penn Foster student, Penn Foster guest, alumni, partner, or employee. Great responses coming in. Welcome to you all. Welcome back. One other thing I want to share with you really quickly. So our session is being recorded this afternoon, and you're going to receive a follow-up email probably about an hour after the conversation ends. It will include a link to the recording, but I want to share that anything that you're typing into that questions box is coming directly to me. So you have an expectation of privacy and of confidentiality in everything that you're sharing. Anything that you're typing in that questions box is not going to be seen by any other students or participants. It's also not going to be seen as part of that recording. Unfortunately, Melanie does not have the ability to see those questions. So I'm going to be hanging out with you this afternoon, and I'll be interjecting periodically and asking your questions of our presenter. So it looks like we have about 90% are Penn Foster current students, 6% guests, and about 4% alumni. So thanks everybody for sharing that information with me. And so it looks like we are all set to get started. Just one other thing that I want to share with you. In the handout pane, as part of that control panel, you're going to be finding at the end of our session that your certificate of attendance is going to be there for you as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce Melanie Andreoli-Carpenetti. She's here to speak with us about effective interviewing skills. Melanie, I'm going to give the keyboard and the mouse over to you at this time, and you are all set. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Katie, thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope where you're at, it's warm and sunny, which is certainly a lot more to speak of than Northeast Pennsylvania, where it's dreary and rainy. Regardless, I hope you all had a wonderful weekend, and I thank you for joining me today. And I wanted to talk briefly about just who I am and sort of my level of expertise when it comes to this. So as Kate said, my name is Melanie Andreoli-Carpenetti. That name is a mouthful. Please call me Melanie. I am the head of human resources here at Penn Foster, and I've been working in human resources for the last 20 years. And I think my expertise in interviewing is pretty sound, given that I've interviewed close to, 500-600 people over the course of my career. So I know a little bit about interviewing, and I'm happy to talk about it today. I do encourage questions. So as Katie had mentioned previously, if you do have questions, please type them in. No question is a dumb question or a stupid question. In fact, just the opposite. I think that the smartest people ask questions. So I encourage all of you to ask questions, and I'm happy to answer them as we move along. So I'm going to jump right in. Katie, unfortunately, I'm not seeing the bar to advance the slides. There it is. Thank you. So again, my name is Melanie. I'm your workshop facilitator. Let's go over a couple of the important items we will be discussing today. First and foremost is preparing for the interview. You will find that interviewing is probably the most important and critical step of the talent acquisition and recruiting process. So not only are we going to discuss preparing for the interview, but we're also going to cover common interview questions, successful interviewing strategies and what it means to be an active participant, how to dress the part. I get a lot of questions from individuals, particularly students, on how to dress correctly and how to dress for success. And then finally, how to be an active participant. So before we get into the meat of the session, let's just go over a couple of ground rules for today's sessions. First and foremost, I ask everybody in attendance to just have fun. Please participate. Please ask questions. I encourage them. I think we get the most out of our time together by being interactive and allowing me to answer some of your questions to the best of my ability. Finally, please mute yourself to avoid any distracting background noises, which I know Katie does an excellent job of taking care of that. So let's just jump right into it. Let's talk about some top interviewing blunders that not only students encounter on a regular basis, but everyday professionals. And you can see that in front of you in terms of what they really look like. First and foremost, it's dressing inappropriately. And I always use the phrase, if you wear it to the beach or to the bar, it's probably not appropriate for a professional interview. So please be mindful of what you're wearing. Secondly, you're an interviewer and you're not prepared for the interviewer. And what I mean by that is you don't know anything about the company, you don't know anything about the individual who will be interviewing you. Third, your communication skills are poor at best, or your nonverbals aren't very strong when it comes to eye contact, shaking hands, things of that nature. Fourth, your cell phone goes off in the middle of the interview. Even if it vibrates, it's still a distraction, and it can let the interviewer signal to them that maybe you're not fully engaged. Fifth, fuzzy facts about maybe your background, fuzzy facts about the person interviewing you, fuzzy facts about the company in and of itself. Sixth, you give the wrong answer. Maybe you don't know the year the company was founded, or maybe you completely screw up the individual's name who is interviewing you. What about bad-mouthing past employers? You talk negatively about your former boss. You talk harshly about a former coworker. Stay away from that. You obviously want to appear as professional, as genuine, and as polite as possible. And then finally, this is a big one, and it happens more often than not. You forget to follow up or write a thank you note. So we'll talk about all of these in more details. Before I get into anything else, Katie, I'm going to ask you, are there any outstanding questions out there that perhaps I can answer?
So actually, what's coming in now, it seems though our participants have questions about what to say, what not to say, and I'm seeing some comments about feeling like I never wear the appropriate outfit for a job interview. So we're right on track.
Great. So let's talk about wear and what to wear. And here's my word of advice. I'm not asking all of you to go out and invest in a $2,000 suit, head to Bloomingdale's or head to Saks Fifth Avenue and get the latest designer outfits. On the contrary, we're all working with sort of a limited budget. We all don't have personal shoppers at our disposal. So my recommendation would be, and the ones that leave the most valuable impressions with me, are the individuals who look neat, who look polished, who wear colors that aren't distracting. So we can talk really specifically about colors. Some of the colors that really resonate with me and look the most polished and professional are your dark grays, your light grays, your navy blues, your blacks. Stay away from anything that's fluorescent. Stay away from anything that's really bold. Obviously, you don't want to wear something that's endorsing perhaps a political party or some sort of advertisement like Budweiser beer. I mean, those are the obvious ones. In terms of your hair, just keep it neat, keep it professional. Stay away from really strong scents. Ladies, if you have really long hair, don't tease it up. Stay away from the big, crazy hairstyles. Just pull it back, keep it neat, keep it professional. But if I were you, I would go out and I would invest in probably a decent suit, and you can get something really, really reasonable at a Target, at a Walmart, at even a Macy's Macy's. So, set some money aside and invest in something that just looks polished, looks professional. Certainly don't wear anything that's tight, something that reveals, more than you probably would want to reveal. If you're going to wear a skirt, don't wear anything that's, gravely above the knee. Just think professional, think polished, think just pulled together. In terms of presenting yourself, it's sort of the old school, what did your mom and dad teach you your first day of kindergarten? And what I mean by that is treat others the way you want to be treated. Simply make really solid eye contact. Greet them with a warm, friendly smile. Greet them with a strong, solid handshake. Hi, my name is Melanie. Thanks for having me today. It's really great to meet you. And just sit down and sort of start that way. So I hope that answers some of your questions. As I advance the slides, we're going to get a little bit more, into that. So how do we prepare for the interview? Let's talk a little bit about what adequate and solid preparation looks like. First and foremost, folks, let's research the company. And what I mean by that is let's check the company website. So Google is beautiful. Google is a wonderful tool for this. Go in and Google the company. Once you do that, go in and check their company website. Have an understanding of what they do. Have an understanding of how they make money. Have an understanding of recent news. Check their public relations page. Check recent press clippings. What's new, what's in the news for that company. Because those are things that you can talk to when they say, hey, do you have any questions or is there anything you want to offer? Secondly, let's anticipate and let's practice interview questions. Interviewers love to ask, what are your strengths? Can you give me 3 strengths? And please, word of advice, don't say, oh, I don't have any. Everybody has strengths. Everybody has strengths. Or they might ask you, what are some areas for development, which is just really a fancy way of saying what are some weaknesses you have. And again, my advice would be don't say, oh, I don't have any, because none of us are perfect. We all have things that we can improve upon. So let's practice and anticipate some standard interview questions. Another one they might ask you is, why do you want this job? Or how do you think you will do well or excel in this job? So practice those questions. Think about what they're going to ask you. Thirdly, again, check your wardrobe. You don't have to invest in a solid designer suit, but do look the part, do look as professional as possible. Fourth, update your resume. You'd be surprised by how many individuals I have interviewed who have not or did not have a current resume. So make sure that it includes your most recent employment, make sure it includes your most recent education, and make sure it includes all of your skills. And you probably want to bring several copies of your resume on good quality sheets of paper to the interview, especially if you're meeting with a panel or especially if you're meeting with more than one individual. You can, and that's a good, it's going to make you look good. It's going to make you look like you're prepared because you sit down with the interviewer and you hand them your resume. They're really going to appreciate that because that means they don't have to sort of fumble through their files to look through for your resume. Finally, check your online and social media presence. And what I mean by that is make sure there are no distasteful pictures of you out there. Some employers will look for you online. And if they see a picture of you doing something that's not really pleasant or not really professional, that could be a reflection on you. So you probably want to check your social media presence, your Twitter accounts, Snapchat, Facebook, all of that good stuff, and make sure that the pictures of you represent you in a professional and I will say positive capacity. So what are some commonly asked job interviewing questions that professionals typically ask students or professionals coming in to an interview? One big one is, why do you want to work for us? Why do you want to work for this company? That's a good one. So think about that, have a good answer prepared, and be able to speak to it. Another one is, what are your future career plans? I always like to ask that one. What are your career goals? And if you just sort of sit there and say, well, I don't really have any, well, that's probably going to be a reflection on you. That's not necessarily a positive one. So be prepared to think about what you want to do in terms of a future career. Another big one that I always ask and that I prefer is, and this is usually how I start my interviews off, tell me something about yourself. And it's interesting because some interviewees will say, well, Melanie, what do you want to know? And I'll usually respond by saying, well, tell me something that you're comfortable sharing with me. And I get a wide range of answers. Some interviewees will tell me, well, I'm married and I have a child and I was born and raised in New York City and I went to school at New York University. And some will tell me their hobbies. Some will tell me their professional experiences. A bit of coaching for all of us on the line is don't spend 20 minutes talking about yourself for this introductory question. You know, keep it succinct, keep it brief, but also keep it meaningful. Another question that they'd like to ask is, why did you choose this particular field of work? You know, maybe it's an entry level position. A good response to that would be, well, I want to get my feet wet. I want to dip my toe in the water, and your company is really compelling to me, and I want to contribute to a growing organization, and this is the company I want to do it with. You know, what else? What are your strengths? What are some things you're good at? Think of 3 things you're really good at. You know, me personally, I like to say I get along with all types of people. I have really strong interpersonal skills. Another one is I'm smart. I think I'm really smart. You're not bragging about yourself. You're just being honest. So that's a really positive thing to say about yourself. Shine. Now is your time to shine. Don't shy away from that. What else? What are some of your areas of development? I get asked this a lot, and some of the things that I like to answer is, well, I have a bias for action, which means I like to do things really quickly. And in doing that, sometimes I'm not thinking through all of the variables or the entire scenario of a situation. So sometimes that gets me into trouble. And then they might ask you what's called a behavioral interview question, which we're going to talk about a couple of slides from here, which is describe a past work situation where you encountered a problem and described how you solved it. This is what's known, folks, as a behavioral interview question. And I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions about these commonly asked job interview questions.
Melanie, we do have one that just came in.
Sure.
So I've always read that when you're asked to tell the interviewer a little bit about yourself during the interview, especially at the beginning, that you never tell them anything that isn't related to the job or to your skills. Use this to highlight instead what makes you stand out above all the other candidates. What's your take on this advice?
That's solid advice, but it's certainly not the be all end all. Some of the most worthwhile exchanges I had with candidates did involve some insight into their personal life. And certainly they didn't delve too deep and tell me their entire life story. You know, I was born at 7:49 a.m. at Community Medical Center in Scranton, but sometimes they'll say, hey, you know, my proudest accomplishment is my family. And that's sometimes a very solid and positive idea or thought to leave the interviewer with. So yes, certainly talk about your skills and what you can bring to the table in terms of your skills, in terms of your competencies. If you're going to talk personal, just be careful. You certainly want to understand your audience, and you certainly don't want to give them too much information that's sort of going to make their eyes roll. But just be comfortable, and it's a solid, corny cliche, but be yourself, most of all. Be yourself.
We have a follow-up question on that about confidence and about nervousness. So any advice that you can give about how to overcome feeling nervous? Do we communicate the fact that we're nervous? Do we acknowledge it? And also, how would you recommend that we show that we're confident in that initial meeting?
That's a great question. And your nonverbals are very, very important here. And what I mean by that is your nonverbal communication. So come in strong, firm handshake, look them in the eye. When they're talking to you, look them in the eye. When you're communicating with them and answering questions for them, look them in the eye. I always appreciate when I'm meeting someone for an entry-level position and they convey to me, hey, Melanie, I'm really nervous, because then my job is sort of to put them at ease. And sometimes what I do is, hey, can I offer you a cup of coffee? May I offer you a glass of water? So I think it's okay to be transparent, and I think it's okay to say, I'm nervous, but don't forget about your nonverbal communication. You know, 70% of our communication with others is normally nonverbal, so make sure you're strong with that. Again, the old school basics, look them in the eye, strong, firm handshake, so on and so forth. And just be mindful of sort of how you're communicating. Try and shy away from like, and those awkward fillers, because that's just sort of going to give away some of your nervousness.
We have one other question specifically on this slide, actually two more really quickly. So what would be an appropriate response? What would you recommend saying as to why you want to work with the company?
That's a great question. And I think it always impresses the interviewer when you say, well, I did my research and I saw that you recently X, Y, and Z, and sort of a give them an inkling, give them an idea of that you did your research, show them that you saw a recent press release and they were involved in X, Y, and Z. And then you can say, that really impressed me. That's something I definitely want to be a part of. Another idea could be, well, I did my research. I see that your mission is X, Y, and Z. They're always impressed when you talk about their mission or perhaps their values, their company values. And then you can follow that up by saying, that's something I really want to be a part of. I believe in that mission. I believe in those values and I want to be a part of that. That always looks impressive to an interviewer.
Is there such thing as too much eye contact?
Great question. I don't think so. I mean, of course, if you're leering at them, that's going to make the interviewer uncomfortable. But I've been doing this for 20 years. I've never been in a situation where I had an interviewee make me uncomfortable with eye contact. So no. Sit up straight in your chair, no slouching, shoulders back, sort of all those things that probably mom and or dad taught you growing up. They still stick. They still stick. And above all else, be yourself. Be yourself.
It looks like we have two final questions specifically on this slide. So this question was asked twice. When they ask you about your analytical skills, what do you recommend the best answers to be?
That's a great question. And at the risk of sounding wishy-washy, it depends. And here's why. Are analytical skills an essential requirement for the job? If they are, be honest. Don't ever lie in an interview. Don't ever say, yeah, I'm amazing with my analytical skills. And then you get the job and day one, they're having you do analytical work and you have no idea what you're doing. So I think honesty is the best policy. So let's say that analytical skills are an essential job function. They're a requirement for the job. It's something you're probably going to be doing 90 to 95% of the time. Say you're not very good at them. Be honest. Say, well, in my schooling, I took a class on X when it came to analytics, or during my internship or externship, I had experience with analytics doing Y. So tell them that, but then say, I definitely can use some additional development in this area. And I think with the right training on the job, I can definitely get where I need to be. Let's say analytical skills aren't required for the job in and of itself. It's likely that they probably aren't going to ask a particular question like that. So you probably don't have to worry about it in that scenario.
Okay,
And then Katie.
we have one other question on that, and this is back to talking about weaknesses. Are there any weaknesses that you shouldn't acknowledge that you perceive to be a challenge?
I once had a woman tell me she enjoyed walking through graveyards as a weakness.
Oh
And I'm
my
laughing because
goodness.
yes, it was a real question. She said that she just in love she loved anything to do with death and she loved walking through graveyards. And it was just such an inappropriate response and it was so out of context and so out of line that I almost wanted to end the interview there because it was just so incredibly awkward. But she didn't think it was awkward, but it was really awkward for me. So yes, stay away from things like that when it comes to weaknesses. But I think the worst thing you can probably say to anyone interviewing you is, I don't have a weakness, because it really comes across as just how, you're haughty and you're the greatest thing that ever, came and went. So I think that's probably the worst thing you can say in an interview, because we all have weaknesses, right? We all have things that we can do better.
I think that answers all the questions that we have at this moment. I'm going to
Right?
advance to the next slide.
Sure. So I touched upon it with the last bullet point on the previous slide. And this is something that I'm encouraging all of you to research a little bit more because these are big time questions that interviewers like to ask in interviews. And they really caught on probably in the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years. And they're called behavioral interview questions. So here's what a behavioral interview question is. It's when interviewers develop questions to essentially determine how successful you're going to be given the specific tasks of a job. So, in other words, what they're looking for is how you handled a task, a situation in the past, and how that sort of handling of that task or situation is going to predict your future behavior. And questions are generally formatted by presenting a situation, asking you about what action you have taken to respond to something in the past and what the result is. So here's some examples. For example, Cindy, tell me about a time where you disagreed with a coworker. How did you handle that? What happened? What were you sort of disagreeing about? That's one example. Another example could be, Joe, can you tell me about a time where you were faced with a tough deadline? What happened? And here's why these questions are sort of challenging, because they require you to think quickly on your feet. So you're sitting there and you hear these questions, and in your mind, you're going to have to go back and, oh my goodness, what's the answer to this? And I've had entry-level candidates say to me, Melanie, is it okay if I talk to you about, because I don't have professional work experience and because this is an entry level job, can I talk to you about an experience I had in school? Absolutely. Absolutely. Share with me an experience you had with school. That's completely acceptable. And those are things that we like to hear. Another one that I've been asked from a behavioral perspective is, Melanie, tell me about a time where you really failed. What happened? How did you deal with that? So these are really, really big questions. So when we leave this presentation, I encourage all of you to just go into our friend Google and just, Google behavioral interview questions. There's tons and tons of them out there. You might want to start, thinking about, hey, what if I was asked a behavioral interview question? How can I prepare myself for this? Katie, I'm sure we have questions about, these, so I'm happy to answer anything now.
Yep, actually, so we have one that just came in. You've kind of already answered it, but it says, how do you respond to behavioral questions if it's a first job? You don't have any of these issues. Can you predict what you think that you would do? Is offering a prediction sufficient in that instance?
So, first part of that question, if you don't have real world professional experience, try and think of something. It could be a personal story. Hey, my brother and I once fought over a watch, something like that. Because what the interviewer is looking for is how you handled that situation. If you say, well, we sat down, we were open and transparent with each other, and we talked it out, that's way better than saying, well, I got so mad at him, I hit him. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's what the interview is looking for. You can also say, well, when I was in school, I had a disagreement with a professor, and here's how I handled it. If you don't have anything that necessarily applies, yes, you can predict. You can predict. Obviously, be mindful of your prediction, and obviously answer that prediction as professional as possible. You certainly don't want to say, well, I'll get into a screaming match with them in the middle of the floor. That never resonates well with the interviewer, ever.
Would you consider also volunteer experience being sufficient? So if no real world work experience, volunteering would also be appropriate?
Absolutely, absolutely, without a doubt. Volunteer work is work experience in and of itself. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Those are the questions that we have thus far. So let me check. Yep. So we have everything answered up to date. So let's move to this slide.
Okay, how to ask the salary question. This is a big one, and here's why. People usually have some anxiety about answering this question because number one, they don't want to aim too high, or number two, they don't want to aim too low. So my coaching to everyone on the line would be, you probably don't want to name that first number. So let's say the interviewer at the end of the interviewer says, okay, thanks for your time. I have to ask you, what salary are you looking for? And then a million bells and whistles are going off in your head because you're panicking. Oh my goodness, how do I answer this? Always try to deflect this answer until the end of the of the interview. In that way, you're talking at length about your skills, your achievements, your competencies, and what you bring to the table. If the interviewer persists, or if they're savvy, they will, try not to give them the first number. And as I said previously, it may be too high or it may be too low. So I think a really solid response to this question is, so I asked Katie, okay, Katie, what salary are you looking for? And Katie just spent the last hour telling me about why she'd be a great fit for this position. And I'm super impressed with her presentation skills. I'm super impressed with how she carries herself. She's got excellent diction. Her eye contact is solid. She's got a wonderful resume. I think she can do the job. I think a solid response to this question would be, well, Melanie, in general, I really think I can be a great asset to this company. As a result, I expect a salary that's consistent with current employees at the same level. And then boom, you've answered it without really answering it. And it leaves the interviewer with the impression like, wow, they've kind of done their homework and they know that they sort of don't want to pigeonhole themselves into a salary that may be too much or too little. Now, some jobs say, Melanie, you know what? This only pays whatever, $8 an hour, or Melanie, this position is targeted at $14 an hour. If that's what it is, that's what it is. Thank them and then obviously move on to the next question. But some interviewers will ask you, what salary are you looking for? So I think this is a really solid general response to that question. Katie, I don't know if there are any questions about that.
Yeah, I just want to share that I love that response. That's so perfect. I wish I had that in my arsenal years and years and years ago. What a great response. So we do have a question. How would I request a greater pay rate if the offered rate was too low? So we spoke about this a moment ago. And then there's another question as well. I'll come back to that.
So again, I think it's very fair to say to the interviewer, what are other individuals at this level of experience making? What's commensurate with others? That's very, very fair to say. And it's certainly not obnoxious. It certainly doesn't put you in a position where it kicks the interviewer back on his or her heels. So I think that's very fair. What are others making? Go ahead, Katie.
There's a question here too about what if you quote unquote lowball and you give a number that you find out is actually a bit less than what the company is currently paying other employees. Do you have the ability to go back in and then request more?
I think you always have the ability to go back in and request more. And I think you have that ability as the interview process sort of lengthens and moves on. So if they really liked you, in all likelihood, they're going to bring you back for a second interview and possibly a third. And as talks continue and they get to the negotiation point with you, you can say, look, I've thought a lot about this. I'm really in love with the company. I think this is a great fit for me. I'm really in love with the mission. I'm really in love with the values. This is something I want to be a part of. And initially I offered that I'd be looking to make X. Well, I've given it a little more thought and I think that I'm really in line with Y. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. It doesn't demonstrate that you're greedy or any of those things.
Wonderful. Great responses. Let me see. Yeah, so I think those are the questions that we have to this point. Let's see.
Salary is always a tricky question, folks. You're not alone. I still, flub myself over salaries. So don't, and I've been doing this a long time. So, don't beat yourself up over that. So let's talk about successful interviewing strategies and what sort of makes you hit the ball out of the park. Always note the name of the interviewer so you can ask for him or her upon arrival. I think one of the worst things you can do is when you walk into a company and you're greeted at the front desk by a smiley face. Hi, who are you here to see? And you don't know. Always know, always know. And you can say, I'm here to see Melanie Andrioli and she's expecting me. I have a 2:00 interview. It shows you know your stuff. I always did this. Consider traveling to the interview site ahead of time. I always did this. I lived in New York City for a number of years, and when you interview in New York City, they give you a very cryptic address of, 785 Madison Avenue. And you're always sitting there thinking, okay, what are the cross streets? Is that between 31st Street? Is that between 32nd Street? So literally the day before, I would jump on the subway and I would travel myself, usually at night, to the interview site because I want to see how long it took me. Do I have to plan for any travel delays, so on and so forth. So always consider traveling to the interview site ahead of time, because one of the worst things you can do is show up late. Don't do that. It's a major faux pas. Again, arrive early, but not too early, because normally these individuals who you're meeting with have a very busy schedule. If you show up too early, they're not going to have the ability to meet with you early because their day is usually booked. So please be mindful of that. And then finally, be courteous to everyone you encounter. It goes without saying, please, thank you, greet people, say hello, so on and so forth. What do you bring? Bring paper to jot down names, information, and questions. I'm always impressed by the people who take notes. There's nothing wrong with that. And you probably want to ask ahead of time, Melanie, do you mind if I take notes? Absolutely, go right ahead. Bring a black pen. Don't bring a glitter pen with fluorescent orange, glitter bombs. Bring a professional black or blue pen. Bring your ID, especially if you're going into a building that has security, guards. They're going to want to see your ID. Be prepared to bring a reference list. Sometimes they do ask for references right up front. Bring your work history, which is always on your resume, which sometimes you're going to be asked to fill out a paper application when you arrive, although that's not really the norm these days because most of us fill out those lovely applications online. As I said earlier, please bring several clean copies of your resume and your cover letter so you can hand that out to the individuals who you meet with. And then if you're interviewing for a job that requires a portfolio, let's say you're going to meet with a marketing team and they want to see a portfolio of your last creative work, bring that with you. Let's say you're a photographer and you're going to meet with a photography studio and they want to see your work. Bring your portfolio with you. Same thing for anybody who works in a creative industry or who is interviewing for a creative job. Bring a portfolio of your work with you because they are going to want to see that. And most importantly, it shows and demonstrates that you're prepared. Interviewers always like the prepared individual.
We have one question about your point, arrive early but not too early. How early is too early? So what's the recommended amount of minutes that you would say someone should arrive?
I think if you show up, and that's a great question, I think if you show up a half hour early, that's probably too early. I think if you show up 10 to 15 minutes prior, that's usually a good time frame. Good
Okay,
time frame.
thank you. So this one I think we kind of already answered, but is it okay to bring a notebook?
Yes, yes. I encourage note taking, but you probably want to ask in advance if you can take notes.
Okay, wonderful. Yep, so those are our questions at this time.
Okay,
Whoops.
that's okay.
Move back.
Dressing for interview success. If you look down on the lower right-hand corner, those are great interviewing outfits. And I'm sure they didn't cost a fortune. You can get those outfits at Target, at Walmart. I'm serious. Those are great looks. Those are wonderful, wonderful looks. And I know it sounds sort of tongue in cheek, but if you wear it to the beach or the bar, please don't wear it to an interview. And I mean that. I can tell you horror stories about candidates who showed up just looking distasteful, and I'll sort of leave it at that. Be clean, be neat, look professional. Stay away from really loud, bizarre makeup. Keep your hair neat. Pull it back if you'd like. No loud colors, no loud prints. Just keep it simple. You cannot go wrong with gray, dark gray, navy, or black colors. You can't go wrong with those. One of my best interview suits is a basic black skirt and jacket that I love wearing. I always joke that it's my power suit. And what I mean by that is every time I put it on, I feel insanely confident. And I think that's what you want to look for, folks, is do you have that one outfit that just makes you feel confident that's an absolute showstopper? If not, you probably want to invest in one. And you can get a pretty decent suit for, I don't know, $50, $60. And that's probably something you'll have to budget for. But make it part of your arsenal. Any questions about?
We don't have any, actually, I'm sorry, no, I just saw a question come in.
Sure.
Um, So we're saying, love the idea of a power suit reference. Does a suit have to be a skirt for a woman or a nice pair of dress pants? Okay.
Great question. I've worn both. I've worn both. I've worn pants, I've worn slacks, and I've worn a skirt. I think it's just a matter of personal preference.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, clean and well pressed clothes. Please don't show up in a wrinkly suit. Please. Make sure your clothes are pressed. Make sure you're clean shaven, or if you have a beard, it's neatly trimmed. You probably want to conceal piercings and tattoos, especially if it's a very corporate, cutthroat environment, banks, investment firms, things like that. Please, subtle fragrances only. If you walk in and you are wearing a very strong, powerful perfume, let's say the interviewer has an allergy to that, it's probably going to leave a bad taste in their mouth. Be aware of your nails. You want clean nails. You don't want dirty, dirty nails, because this is all an impression that you are leaving people with. Don't smoke prior or chew gum during the interview, because especially smoke, that smell is going to linger and the interviewer is going to pick up on it. And then finally, turn off your cell phone. I recommend putting it right on airplane mode. You don't even want it to vibrate, because that is a distraction to the interview in and of itself.
Two questions on
Sure.
this. One participant is saying, I've been told before to quote unquote dress one up from what your interview is wearing. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that's really a good rule of thumb. I think that's certainly a good rule of thumb, but you also run the caveat there that if you're dressed better than the interviewer, they might be like, "Oh, look at how fancy this one is." I think it's keen to say use your best judgment. Definitely use your best judgment, and you can't go wrong with navy, blue, and black and gray. You really can't. Use your best judgment.
Another question on this. So, if you're going for a work interview at a veterinary clinic, do you recommend that I wear a suit, or should I wear scrubs that I typically would wear to work on a daily basis?
That's a great question, and I think you really have to know your environment. I don't think you can ever go wrong looking polished and pulled together. I don't think you can ever overdress for an interview. And if you do, you can even make a joke about it. Convey your humor. Let's say everyone around you is wearing scrubs. You can say, "Gee, wow, I guess I overdressed." I think humor in that situation is always advisable, and it sort of sets the interview off in a wrong tone, or excuse me, a right tone. I don't think you can ever overdress for an interview. Obviously, if you're wearing a ball gown, then you're overdressed. So no ball gowns, no ball gowns. But I don't think you can ever overdress.
How about, so to the opposite end, what if they recommend that you dress casually? What do you think would be too casual, or what would you recommend for when you're being told to wear casual clothes to the interview?
Some places of employment will dictate how you dress. And if they dictate casual, then that's fine. It's their sort of request. But again, keep in line the other guidelines. No loud colors, no endorsements, no political statements, nothing bizarre. Your makeup should be obviously in line with expectations, so on and so forth. So again, use your best judgment.
A real quick question here: would it be better to wear no makeup at all, rather than having to worry about wearing too much makeup?
I think it depends on how you look without makeup. If I walked into a room without makeup, I think I'd scare the interviewer. If you have amazing glowing skin and you're confident in how you look without makeup, then by all means, rock it. Rock it. I think it's important to understand your level of confidence. If you are not confident in your ability to go makeup free, then you probably don't want to do it. It's all about confidence. Be confident.
There's a really good question here, and it speaks back to the earlier point that you made about body language being 70% of our communication. So, do you believe that when we're being interviewed, are we getting judged by what we're wearing, or by the way we're speaking, or do you think it's a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. I think there's always an unconscious bias on behalf of the interviewer. when someone walks in. I think there's always a judgment. I think that's just human nature in general, and that's just certainly my opinion. I'm not saying it's the lay of the land, but I think it's definitely a combination of both. That's why you want to present yourself in the best possible light. Polished, professional, confident, good eye contact. I mean, those are the fail safes.
Okay, those are the questions that we have to this point.
Great. Be an active participant. And what I mean by that is be honest. If you don't know the answer to a question, please don't lie. You can say to them, gee, I'm not sure where you're going with that question, or it's hard for me to answer. Can you perhaps clarify that question? Ask questions about their question if it doesn't make sense. Always give complete answers. One of the worst things you can do is one-word answers. Yes, no, I don't know. Give a complete answer. Be positive. Be positive about yourself. Have confidence about where you're coming from. Have confidence about your skill set. As I said just prior, avoid 1 or 2 word responses. Speak in complete sentences. Give concrete examples of past experiences or past situations. If you don't know the question or don't understand it, or something's ambiguous, paraphrase the question to avoid any misunderstandings. You probably want to try and limit your responses to 30 seconds, because if you're talking way too much and going on and on and on, that's a reflection of you. So be succinct, be direct. Try not to speak with lots and lots of fluff and go on 5, 6, 7 minutes of question. Because remember, the individual interviewing you, they're busy. They have a packed schedule. So be respectful and mindful of their time. And then finally, emphasize what you have to offer the company. Let them know, hey, here's why I think I'll be an asset. Here's why I think I'm going to be great for this job. Here's why I think I'm a wonderful fit. No one's going to sell yourself for you. You have to sell yourself. So be confident in doing that.
No questions. No questions on this slide. We'll move to the next.
Again, participate. Introduce yourself with a firm handshake. Sit up, lean forward, make eye contact, smile. Do you see the themes here? Avoid crossed arms and legs, because sometimes that gives off the nonverbal that, why am I here? You certainly don't want to give off that feeling. Use head nods, good facial expressions. And then when you're done, ask the person for their business card. That way you can write them a nice thank you. Go ahead, Katie. Always participate. Again, ask questions. This is a good one. What will my typical day look like? What are the company's values? Tell me about the culture. What do you like about working here? So when they turn the interview over and say, Sally, do you have any questions? These are 4 good ones. Write them down. They're great, great ones. Don't ask, yeah, what am I going to be paid? Because they're going to think, my goodness, is that all he or she thinks about? Always express thanks and find out when a decision will be made. Ask for the timetable. When can I expect to hear about a decision? Katie, we can skip over that. This is important. Always follow up after your interview with a warm thank you note to the person who has interviewed you. It's probably the most important letter that you write. It provides another level of contact with the person who you've met, and it always sets you apart from those who didn't send one. It should take place within 24 hours after the interview. The follow-up letter should include, thanks for your time. Again, they're busy. Melanie, thanks for meeting with me today and taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to me about the HR assistant role you have available. Explain what you liked about the position. I was really excited to learn about the fact that I'll be doing a number of different things and working cross-functionally with a number of different people. And then finally, sound enthusiastic about working for the company. I think I can jump in and make an immediate contribution to the company. The values and mission are right in line with what I'm looking for. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Boom, that's it. You can send it through email. That's why you ask for their business card. You can even send it through snail mail. I've gotten both. Whatever you're comfortable with. So let's go over what we covered today. Always remember to make a great first impression. Always. You can't undo a first impression that someone has of you. Always be professional. Always look professional. They're two different things. Being professional and looking professional are equally important. Always make solid eye contact and always have a firm handshake. Always ask questions during the interview, and that means being an active participant. Always do your research about the company, and you probably want to research the individual who you're meeting with. And then always follow up with a timely thank you letter to the person who took time out of their schedule to meet with you. I welcome any questions you have, in addition to the ones I've answered.
So we have one here. Is it okay to call the interviewer if they've not gotten back with you after the interview as to whether or not you have or haven't gotten the job? For example, if it's been 3 weeks since the interview, should I call?
I would probably email because I think an email is less invasive than a phone call. So you probably want to shoot them an email instead. That's why it's important to ask for their business card.
Is there a length of time that's too short or a length of time that's too long to do that follow-up thank you or that follow-up email?
Yes, the next day is obviously too short. Probably that week is too short. That's why it's important to ask them when they hope to reach a decision. I think if you wait any more than, I don't know, 2 months, it's probably too long. Sometimes if you don't hear from them and they're not a company who is skilled at following up with their applicants, they will ignore you, hoping you'll go away. I don't advocate that. I don't think that's a good strategy from a company's perspective. But 9 times out of 10, if you don't hear from them, it probably means you didn't get the job. But they should do the right thing and let you know regardless.
There's one here. So how soon should we expect a call from the interviewer?
If they want to move quickly, they will probably call you that week or email you or reach out to you that week. So I think, during that week, it really depends on their process. Again, that's why it's important to ask when they hope to reach a decision or, hey, what are the next steps here? It's very fair to ask them that.
So we have a bunch of comments are coming in and they're clarifying that they're not questions, but they're specifically thank yous. Thank you for all of your help, fun advice. I'm going for my first job interview soon. All of this is going to be useful. I've been taking notes. I haven't been sure how to present myself, and this information has really helped me. So there are a lot of appreciative notes that are coming in. So I can't wait to share this report with you.
I'm so glad to hear that. Folks, again, and I am an adjunct professor at a local college here, and I do give this course to my students. And it's the old trusted advice, and I mean this sincerely. Just be yourself. It's okay to be nervous, especially if this is your first professional interview. Just be yourself. And remember, good eye contact, good firm handshake, look professional, be professional, just be yourself, and you will do no wrong. So I wish all of you good luck. I welcome anything else. Katie has all of my contact information. So good luck in the interviewing world, and I hope you all do well and knock it out of the park.
Melanie, thank you so much for this valuable advice. Such really great information has been shared with our guests, our students, our participants today. And I want to thank all of our guests and our participants for your active feedback, your questions. This was a really great group to work with and have this conversation with this afternoon. Before you go, I just want to quickly remind you that we are so excited. Our Penn Foster graduation is coming up. The date is June 2nd, and it's being held at the Mohegan Sun Arena in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, just a short distance from our office in Scranton, Pennsylvania. If you're interested, you can get more information by visiting pennfoster.edu/graduation, or you can email social@pennfoster.edu as well. So you're going to be receiving a follow-up email within the hour or so. It's going to include a link to a survey. Please be honest with us. Share your honest feedback with us about this particular session. Also give us guidance about what additional sessions you'd like to see offered here at Penn Foster. Register for additional sessions. I believe we have a total of about 40 to 45 sessions over the course of just this week between now and 8 o'clock Friday evening. You can continue the conversation with us on social media by using the hashtag SSCF18, Student Success and Career Fair 18. And of course, you can access and download the certificate that's included in the handout section of your control panel at this time. So once again, thanks everyone for joining us. Melanie, thank you so much. This was a really great conversation. We value your input. So thanks everybody. We look forward to seeing you again at the next session. Have a great Monday afternoon. Take care.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thanks.